In this video, I would like to show you how we can actually be a little bit more creative with our background, because currently we just use a plain gray, and how to load a so-called environmental image that actually will illuminate our scene just with the colors of that image. And then we will place a camera, position the camera correctly, and render a good image out. Okay, so let me pause the rendering. Let's go to a browser, and for example, let's type in what you want to look for is free HDRI. Okay, so HDRI means high dynamic range image, and think about it as how much color information an image can keep. A JPEG, for example, is 8-bit. It's a pretty weak image. It's called a low D, so low density. And an HD image has just much more color information, so more color tones. And these color tones then can be used with the render engine to shoot out light rays. So for example, let's go to SIBL and go to the archive. And there we see, for example, those images. And let me explain you what this means. So somebody not only a panoramic, but did a 360, like a spherical photography of such an environment, unwrap that into a photo, and when we bring that into Blender, you will see this image kind of like a scene, a sphere around your object. So for example, let's see which one we're going to use, which has a nice contrast. Maybe let's try this one. I didn't try this one yet. Okay, so I can click download. It's downloading a second. I'm also pushing this one down. And there is sunrise. And let's take a look at what we have here. Okay. So you have a JPEG preview, just ignore that one. You have an environmental, you have an 8K JPEG, also ignore. This can be used for the background in Photoshop. And then we have the sunrise EXR. Now these two images, we can use. So for example, you see this one is 18, this one, oh, it's only 100, and the JPEG is 52, so not really enough light information. So I'm going to use the sunrise, the EXR. So I'm doing this, I'm selecting all these lights, I press M, and I move them onto this layer where they were. Oh, perfect. So I go just layer 1. So I only have this as the rendering. Then we will go to the world setting. Also down here, for example, you can switch between object and world. And then we click on color, environmental texture. And when I do this, pay attention to how this one is being swapped out. I mean, something got added to the color. And then you have the open dialog. You see all this, and this is the same open. Then I go to downloads there and there. Open. Okay. Let's press Shift Z for shading. Takes a second. And if it looks like this, you're in orthographic. Go into perspective, and now you see there's environment. You see, if I rotate, how awesome is that? Okay. We can set this to 1. See, then actually we make that image stronger. And now, for example, you can see there's my sun, so all that light comes actually from there. And if I look from here you can really see how all the light from all those 360 degrees is being projected into my object, below, the top. If I make this one a tick stronger, there. And you see also the metal or the plastic reflection reflects this one. So maybe in this case, I'm going to change this material here back to something like this. There. Now this works better in this environment setup. Oh, not from that view. So let's actually click X, and when you see this magenta, that means that's an error code. A material is missing. So we go open. Let's go to downloads, industrial hall, here, open. And you see now this environment is more grayish in all its tones. Also, it is more, there's no strong sun or something. So in general, the illumination is really soft, not as dramatic. The part also doesn't get crazily tinted by the environment image. Okay, maybe change this one or there. There. Okay. Now maybe you would like to rotate the environment image. You don't really want to rotate your object, you just want to rotate this environment image. And we don't have an option directly here to do this. So I can click on the world. And basically what I have to do is I have to create an information for XYZ orientation, how to rotate it, and how that rotation should be used for the texture image, which is then being rotated and be put into the background image, which is the light. Okay, so what we do is add input texture coordinates. So this one basically will tell the software how, for example, the coordinates should be generated. Something should always be kind of like adjusted by the camera, UV. I will actually go into all those at one point. So just copy and paste what I'm doing. Then we go to add and we go vector and mapping. So you see all those vectors or directions have blue dots. So I can connect this one to here and I can connect, you see this is black, this one to there. And then we're back exactly the same way we were before. So this one by default is using generated, but we would like to rotate it. So we say use the generated XYZ orientation, put that into the rotation or mapping, and when we adjust the values, put that into the environment. And now you have location, rotation, and scale. Let's see what happens with scale. Can squeeze it. What happens when we move this one? So we're just kind of like moving it crazily, but all that stuff is kind of distorting the image. What we want is actually use Z. You see Z is up, and along Z, now we can rotate the image. So you see, and then based on where the bright areas of the image are, that is from where we get all that, well, most of the light. So see, this is actually pretty simple. So again, the logic is we have to establish how X, Y, and Z is generated, and we simply use the generated function. We put that into a node, which we can use to manipulate the original X, Y, and Z orientation. And then that end result, so the coordinate system we adjusted, we tell the texture node to use, and then the end result, the color, we put into the background. So for example, let's see, most of the light comes from there. So let's see what happens if, for example, we move this one so that we have more light from there. Pay attention to the highlight. So there's no highlight because up here, this material cannot reflect anything that's really bright. And there, for example, you see this more. And from here, 0. Yeah. Okay. So you see, that's basically the way how you can then have full control over our environment image and also rotate it. Now let's stop the rendering. Let's go to the web for a moment. And for example, let's see if there are some other sources. So free HDRI image, for example. Let's take a look at this one. And let's take a look at, let's go to the website. So maybe let's take a look at this. Where can we download this one? Oh, well, there's none here. So you might have to spend a little bit of time if you want to Google some results. Oh, this one looks good. Let's go to this website. Okay, so this is an HDRI pack. Oh, here's the download button. Oh, nice. It is actually a pack. So yeah, let's give this one a try. That's actually perfect because there you will see there are different kind of like light studios built just as environmental images. So let's take a look how all those feel. So there you see, for example, an outside, an inside, and there you see like it looks like light boxes, kind of like a camera. So let's say you make rendering of something highly reflective so that you actually can see a fake camera inside the reflection. You see this should simulate a dark room. This is our backdrop. Okay. So yeah, maybe let's use Studio 0 to 8. So I go to click, open, let's go to downloads, Studio 26. Also here to see a preview, you can click on this one. Wait a second, and then it loads all the previews. And click open. And let's see how this one feels. So you see this one is very bright, so we have to tune down the strength of the light. And let's see how this scene looks. So here's my backdrop. So maybe my backdrop should be rotated 90. Yeah, so you see now I have my object kind of positioned so the backdrop is in the back, because there would be the camera. Let's take a look maybe from the side. Actually, how does this look with our additional lights? So I want to actually see everything from here, which means I have to rotate this one minus 90. Yeah, okay, and then I can maybe tune this one down, 0.25, 0.5. Now you might ask yourself, well, why should I use an environmental image and why should I use area lights? Here's a good example. Let's hide this one and this one. And let's take a look at what we have. Okay, let's hide this one and this one. So that's the beauty of those HD images is they really provide a nice illumination. Quick and easy. Compared to, for example, when the world is pure white. This looks more realistic. The downside is you're totally stuck to what's inside that image. Take a look at those crappy highlights. They're actually, with the part I have, they're not really good. I'm stuck basically to work with this one. So to help myself, I simply use this one to give kind of like a nice environmental illumination. And then, for example, I place my other lights, let's say all those, make this one maybe 0.5. So I'm adding another highlight here through that area light. I'm casting a highlight on here through this light. So you see, I'm much more in control over how I work with my highlights because it is so important. And actually also the lower part needs more light. So that basically, in a nutshell, is the reason why I also do not like render engines that only use those background images, which you then can rotate. That's nice and easy, but you seriously are giving up a dramatic amount of control and you're really limiting yourself in what you can do. Okay. So, oh, look at that. Actually, the blade also, because it's angled, the way how it reflects, that all looks pretty good. We set this one to 0. That doesn't look too bad either. So you see it really, I don't know. It's a really nice way to combine everything together. So now let's take a look at actually how we can create a camera and then do the rendering. So I go into top view, right click, add empty plane axis, and I set this one to maybe 10 centimeters. Move it to there, Shift A or add camera. Move this one to somewhere else. The camera icon I can easily scale. That's not a big deal. Okay, so this empty is going to be, or what it is first. It is basically nothing. It's just an object, a point in space, X, Y, Z, and it gives me the location if I rotate this part or if I scale this part. That's a reference point, and I have my camera. Now, you see the lights I always positioned by hand to move them and rotate them. That's actually okay, but a lot of work sometimes. And with a camera, I don't want to move it and then rotate it along X, Y, Z, so I take a look at my object the way how I want. So what I will do is I make this camera look at this empty and move the camera to where I want it to. And because the camera always follows this empty, I place the empty to where I want my camera to look at. So easy. Here's just one really important step to remember. The last object is always your active object. You might have remembered when we copied materials or rotations or location, you always copy something from the last object you have selected. So we want this camera to track this empty. Yep, now you make a copy so you see the difference. Those two cameras track this empty. And then you can press Ctrl T and select track 2. And then you see both cameras are now tracking that empty. How awesome is that? So if I move the camera, you see it always looks at that empty. If I move that empty, they always look at that empty. If I click the camera and I go to this chain icon, that's for constraints, there it says it has a constraint XYZ. Constraints are, for example, you can limit a distance, a rotation, a scale, you can even copy, for example, a position. So it's for animation very good. This light, this camera, I delete. Okay. So I would like this camera to be here. If I press 0, there it is. If I have two cameras, I can click a camera, go to here, press Control 0. Or this camera, Control 0. See, this way I can switch. It's pretty nice. You can also say object, no, view. Where's camera? No, cameras. Set active object as camera. So maybe this one. Select a view, cameras. Set active object as camera. And you notice that actually now this is the active camera and it has a solid triangle. That means when we do a rendering, I think it will go through this one. So let me show you that one in the next step. So I move my empty. Here's my camera. 0. Move this one up. There. And you see how easy that is now. You can zoom in a little bit. Top view, for example, move around. So look at the blade. I can actually move this empty in all views. If I move something in through the camera, it goes really fast, so I'm holding my shift key while moving. Here it's not that much of a problem, but just in the 3D view. Ooh. There. Well, there. Maybe let's make this look a little bit dramatic from below, or for example, there. Select both. GZ to move it up. Let's take a look at the rendering. And then while it renders, for example, I can play around with the camera. So you see, actually don't pay too much attention with the lights and to fine tune, because later maybe if we make different camera views, we might have to adjust the lights anyway so they feel better. So you see, this is actually pretty fantastic. Let's take a look at what we have for camera options. So click the camera. We can say this one should be a 90. So you see the icon changed. So this is a really flat telezoom. Let's change this one to 15. So you see the icon is really small, and we like, wait, there doesn't look as much. Oh, here. It's super stretched, so kind of like a fish eye. Go over something like 55. I find that equal to like how our eyes work. If you have something called start and end clipping, maybe this one set to 1 centimeter. I'm going to show you what this means. See this? Now the camera is beyond 10 centimeters to the object, so it starts clipping the part. We set this one to 1 centimeter there. So we get closer, and when I reach 1 centimeter, then it might happen again. And this one maybe a meter. Okay, so again, the clipping basically means the camera where it starts seeing objects and where it stops seeing objects. That's basically it. For the photography geeks, we also have the grid. So this is really nice. So you can make better compositions and kind of like make a more attractive photo using those helpers. And again, the icon for the camera I can scale down easily. There. And maybe everything down a little bit. GZ with the shift key clicked. Perfect. So we're nearly there. Then you see this is actually kind of like a pass per 2. And if we click on the camera, there's a pass per 2, and you see actually it just darkens the outside. Every time when you press Shift Z or switch to rendering, it renders the whole screen. And maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I just only want to render a certain part. So inside a camera view, you can press Shift B. And you see with Shift B, then it only renders the part you're currently focused on. And to remove the border, simply zip, go over everything. So while I do preview renderings, I work like this. So this way the computer doesn't waste computation power rendering those parts. And then when I'm done and I want to do a final rendering, I can click on this one. Okay, so to do the rendering, what we will do first is actually set the paper format. You can go to here and then say resolution. So you see right now it's 1920 by 1080. Let's save. Here's a little trick. Let me open Pixelmator. So let's say you want to make a rendering that is as wide as a page, but not as tall as a page. So I go to inches and say 8.5 inches by 11. So let's say half of 11 would be 10.5. No, of course, 5.5. And then if you want to print it, 150 dpi at least. So in Photoshop, you also just make a new document. And then do the same with inches and dpi. Okay. And the main reason is if I now go to image size and go to pixels, you see it reads out the amount of pixels I need. So 1275 by 825. And then here I can type this one 825, make this 100%. And you see actually this frame changed. So based on what you have in here, you see your image changes. So what you see through the camera, that's actually the final format in terms of the image. Let's save. And then you can go to render. And there it renders it. Let's press Shift Spacebar, press 1 on the numpad. So this is 1 to 1, 2, or 3. Collect different versions or sizes. Okay. I'm going to repeat this again. Down here in image, now you have save image as and say rendering. Perfect. So let's go to my desktop, and see, there's the rendering written as a file. But the image looks pretty crappy. And let me show you now how we can fix this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a border, press Shift Z for the rendering to start or turn on rendered. And then, for example, under preview, I type in, I don't know, maybe 1000 and just see what it is, what it does. And I'm paying attention to when this one becomes really nice and clean and clear. At what point, for example, which samples I have. I have a problem here. I think this one does not have, it did not have this one turned on. There, okay, I have to restart. So you see it takes a moment to clear up. Basically what the sampling is doing, it's shooting out light rays and light rays and light rays, or render rays if you want to see it that way, and tries to just kind of like sample different parts of the image till the stuff looks good. And actually at 300 this looks good, so I can press Z to go into shaded wireframe mode, Shift B, drag over it to have not any render border, go to the render tab, and now here in render I type in 300. Also, you want to save as PNG and RGBA, and let me go back actually to the rendered image. So you go to UV image editor, and here render result, there's my image. Because there's another problem, I see my background, I don't want that. So after having set the correct render value, I go to film and say transparent. Take a look at what transparent does. You see, it makes the background transparent. So if I do now a rendering, to speed rendering up, I set this one to 25%. And I select a second slot so I can compare and render. There we see the image cut out. And you can see already the quality is much better. Let me explain you Shift spacebar. I can increase and decrease or zoom in and zoom out a viewport, what all this interface stuff here means. For example, here we have a channel. If you click on this one, see this is black and white. That's, for example, the alpha channel. That one, that's for the depth. Well, let's ignore this one for the moment. So this black and white channel, for example, when we export this one as a PNG with the alpha channel, everything that's black will be transparent. And this is like the raw rendering, black background, and then this alpha channel is being used to make the background transparent. Maybe to make the image look a little bit better, let's set it to 50 and render. So you see, the bigger you make an image, of course, the longer it might take. Okay. Then let's go again, PNG or TIFF, doesn't matter, RGBA. We can set actually the output. Maybe I want it to be the desktop. Image, save as, and maybe rendering 2, and make sure this RGBA is clicked. I'm going to use color depth 16 because of a bug I have on my computer. I need to use this one. Save as, and then I go to Pixelmator, for example, open. There's rendering, open, and look, there it is. See, nicely transparent. So I can select this one, copy, paste it in. And there's my object. I don't need to even cut it out anymore, stencil it out. Perfect. How awesome is that? Okay. Only for the Photoshop cracks. You know, in Photoshop you have, for example, levels where you could adjust kind of like, well, no, levels, all that stuff for the rendering. We can do that actually in Blender already before we render it into final image. So I'm going to set this one to the preview rendering. I go to the render layer. Oh, no, sorry, render layer. No, oops, where is it? Oh yeah, sorry, scene, color management, and use curves. No, didn't really change a lot, but look at this. Zip and zip. So I'm giving a little bit more contrast, brightening up the highlights a little bit, and can really be gentle with these values. So you can basically add a little bit of contrast or color correction to your rendering. You see that's the raw rendering. Maybe let's make this one a little bit cleaner. So there we see that it adds a little bit of contrast to it. And you see also it applies to the preview, it applies to the rendered part. If I now go and say save as, and maybe call this one color corrected, 16, save, let's go to Pixelmator, open desktop, there it is. Copy and paste, oops, pasted the wrong document. There you see. I didn't really render the image again because the render result got color adjusted while I was doing the preview rendering. So this is actually applying well to the preview and the rendered image. So to bring this to a close, I actually would like to show you now how we can add a second camera. And for example, let's make an orthographic rendering. So on this layer, I have all my cameras and lights, my object. I'm going to change everything. I select everything, move it to this layer here. I select this shell M, move it onto the second layer. Turn my lights back. And then here, for example, what I'm going to do, I could Shift D this one, but because I want to create an orthographic view onto my object, I don't need to really track my camera. So I'm just creating a new camera. I'm going to scale this one down. And then I have to rotate it correctly. So along the x-axis, 90 degrees, along RZ90, yep. Okay, so you see, just adjusted those x and y values so it looks to the object. In my view here, Control 0. Let's also make this one the active camera. Okay, interesting. Let's do this again. Set as active camera. There. Good. And then I press G and just simply move my mouse up. See, by pressing G, I can move it left and right, up and down. I can't move forward, backwards. I could press G and then Z to go up and down, X left, forward and backwards, Y left and right, or G, Z, local direction, Z. Okay. Press 5. Well, let's take a look how this one looks. So this is now like a perfect dead-on shot onto the part. Let's change the scale a little bit. So you see, I do not move my camera, make a rendering, move the camera, make a rendering. I simply make cameras for all of those views. So later when you design like a presentation material and you want to redo a rendering, you just don't try to reverse engineer the correct positioning of that camera. It's not going to be fun at all. You simply save your cameras as objects. Okay. Now this camera currently is perspective, and you cannot change the view here because this view applies to this perspective view. We have to select the camera, go to camera, and then say instead of perspective, be orthographic. And whoops. Let's move this one. Doesn't change anything. Because where the orthographic camera is, doesn't really matter distance-wise. Well, we have a scale here. Let's see. And there it is. Let's move this one in. You see moving it in doesn't make it closer. We're just scaling this one. So scale this a little bit more. There. G and Shift to fine tune the position. There, how does that look? Yeah, fantastic. So you see now I have a really nice shot into my part, orthographic. I could render and then save that image as another rendering. And then when I save the file, quit Blender, and later come back, I have those cameras saved. Now, for example, in this shot, the material for my metal here looks terrible. And again, sometimes based on the views, you can be creative. So I'm trying to see, can I do something to make this look better? Yeah, that's not really very good. Let me see if I can show this one. Okay, it doesn't really change a lot. Okay, so then let's let's go back to that one. Let's see if we can help maybe with this one. Oh, you see, so maybe bringing the slide a little bit closer, but then I blow everything out more. And I don't really want to change my light too much. And let me show you now a little trick how I'm going to organize my scenes. So this camera I'm going to put onto maybe this layer. This one I Shift D, press escape, move Alt onto that layer. And then this light I go to here and say don't use diffuse, just use glossy. Shift click this layer, shift click this layer to show everything. And then with that light, I have it still selected. For example, I can move it closer. And you see what I'm doing? I'm basically having the light brought in. So for example, it creates a nice reflection on the metal without adding diffuse. That, for example, you can't really do inside studio photography because that wizardry doesn't happen in real life. And this, for example, is so much better than this dull rendering with no highlights on it. It looks terrible. We also have it on the plastic, so that's actually pretty nice. And if I want for this shot to have all these lights have different lights values, then maybe, you know, what I would do is actually Shift D, Escape M, move them onto this layer. This one, Shift D as well. So I make a copy of all those lights onto this layer because maybe now I'm looking into my object. And I might want to look or send more light in there. So now I have a light rig for this design. And I have a light rig, for example, all the other stuff all together. Make sense? So, and if you want to, that's for example the way how I use it. So this should be the one shell which is open. There's the other shell. So maybe actually I should do it this way. This one to 1 here, and then this one to 2. So press 0. Okay, good. And then the metal one, maybe I put onto the 3rd layer. So I can say this light rig in here and this part. Okay, so the lights for everything. Here's my open part and the adjusted lights and the metal part. And you see this way I'm making use of the layers to simply organize what I can see instead of hiding objects, not making them renderable, and just split it up on layers.